Alright guys, let's talk some small soldiers.
Commandos, attack!
I'm talking about toys that are so smart, when kids play with them, they play back.
Chip Hazard, reporting for duty.
You put munitions, chips, and toys?
Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. Yeah, that's right. This week we're going to be talking about a little film called Small Soldiers. I feel like this film doesn't get talked about as much anymore. It came out in 1998, and it's just something that it was a big part of my childhood, as you guys can see. I got these two figures right here. I actually just picked, this one up. My buddy actually picked this for me up at a Rhode Island Comic Con. It was a few years back. He saw this at one of the dealer tables, and he picked it up for me, so that was super cool. He was always one of my favorite characters. And then we have Archer, which I actually found the last year, I believe it was, at like a flea market. He was like $5, and he's like a 12-inch like figure or whatever. So it's a pretty solid deal. But yeah, Small Soldiers was a really important film for me growing up. It was something that I watched a lot. It was just a really fun film, and I wanted to talk about it with you guys. So Small Soldiers is directed by Joe Dante. He directed Gremlins as well as a bunch of other films, but the reason why I mentioned Gremlins you'll see in a little bit. But basically the plot of this film is you have this company that were introduced called Globotech in the beginning of the film. They design like a lot of like military like grade stuff, but they're getting into the toy business because they end up taking over this other company. So they have a couple of the employees that they took from that company, and they're pitching them a couple ideas to introduce, to get made. And these guys, they pitch to the boss, and they bring up the idea of these two different toys. So you have the Commando Elite, and then you have their enemies, which are the Gorgonites. And, they pitch him this idea. The guy, he's like, yep, let's go ahead and do it, because he sees that in the commercial that this guy brings up, that they can, punch out of the boxes and stuff like that. He's like, can they really do that? And they're like, well, no. And he's like, well, I want them to do that. So, they're going to get these toys made, but they give them, a really short deadline. So one of the guys that, pitched the ideas of these toys, he ends up going into, the database and getting military-grade chips installed to these guys to make them to be able to do what they were doing on the commercial, which is pretty crazy but pretty cool too. Imagine if you had a toy that actually did what it did on the commercial. That would be a lot of fun, especially growing up. After this teenager, Alan, he works at his dad's toy shop, and he ends up getting a box of these toys, both the Gorgonites and the Commando Elites, gets delivered to his shop. And he wants to try and sell them to make the shop some extra money. Well, the Commando Elites, they end up trying to destroy the Gorgonites one night, make the store it's a disaster, and then what we think they destroyed them that night. Throughout the rest of the film, we find out that the Gorgonites are actually still alive, and the leader, Archer, is kind of teaming up with Alan to try and find his friends, but then to also stop the Commando Elites. So that's pretty much the basic idea, plot of this film. For those who haven't seen it, it's a pretty fantastic ride if you guys have not checked it out before. So like I said before, as far as the film goes, Joe Dante directed it, and he directed Gremlins. And the reason why I mention that is because there's a lot of, you can just feel that Gremlins kind of vibe, and there's some Easter eggs in this film. At one point, one of the techs, one of the guys who pitched the idea for these toys, he's going to order the military chips, and the guy's or his friend's password is Gizmo. And then you just have the whole idea of Alan. He's this teenage boy. He comes into contact with these things that are a little dangerous, doesn't really know how to handle them, and it takes place in this small town, and craziness ensues. Sounds kind of familiar? Well, that's because it's Gremlins. But it's just kind of cool. I love I love Gremlins 1 and 2. So a lot of Joe Dante's films I was a pretty big fan of. So it's definitely cool to see those little Easter eggs in this film. So I thought for this movie coming out in 1998, I thought the design of these toys, the Gorgonites and the Commando Elites, I thought they were done pretty well. There's at times the CGI isn't the best, but there's definitely you can tell there's practical effects as well. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say it was Stan Winston's company that did some of the special effects, which makes a lot of sense because they've put out a lot of great work. I also thought it was just really cool to see, so the Commando Elite, when they're going after the Gorgonites, they start taking, like, making all these, like, weird gadgets and stuff. Like, at one point, they take, like, a skateboard, I'm pretty sure, and there's, like, a little, like, razor blade thing that's, like, coming at it to, like, cut these, like, toys up and stuff like that. So just, like, throughout this film, they make a lot of these, like, combine a lot of these, like, different household, like, objects and gadgets. And it was just really cool, especially, as, like, a kid growing up, you're just like, wow, I want to do that. And, not really a good idea, but it was just, like, really cool to see. And then these toys come to life. It kind of has that Toy Story, like, aspect to it to a degree. But if those toys were, trying to kill you, basically, yeah, not quite on, like, the Puppet Master or things like that as far as, like, horror goes, although there is some aspects in this movie that were a little creepy, but it's definitely not to, like, that level. But it was just a lot of fun, being, like, a boy growing up and watching this film. Also, I mean, this movie, it had a pretty solid cast. It had, like, Dennis Leary, Kirsten Dunst, David Cross, Dick Miller's in the film, as well as, like, a bunch of, like, other people. So Tommy Lee Jones, he actually did the voice for the Commando Elite, like, the leader of them. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I was like, it was a pretty solid cast. For what it was, it's not something that's going to, like, win, like, well, didn't end up winning any, like, awards or stuff like that. But it was supposed to be just, like, a fun, 90s kids, like, action, like, movie. And I thought for that job, with, like, the comedy and stuff like that, they did a pretty good job, with what they had to work with. So, good performances all around from, like, the different characters, and they were all, at least, like, the main people, they were, pretty likable for, like, the most part, like Alan, Kirsten Dunst's character and stuff like that. Now, one of the scenes that, stands out for me in this film is there is a point where the Commando Elite, they're trying to, like, get more people for, like, their army to take out the Gorgonites, and they end up going into Kirsten Dunst's character's room, and she has all these, they're not quite Barbies, I don't believe it says it, like, on any of the boxes, but they basically are. And they get these, like, they see all these Barbies, and, like, the guys, they're all like, oh my god, like, look at these, like, ladies. And it's just so ridiculous. But they end up bringing, the Barbies to life. And at one point, she, like, comes home from, like, with her, like, boyfriend or whatever, and she comes into her room, and all of a sudden, these Barbies, like, all come to life, and you see, like, their, like, heads, like, spinning around. There's, like, one that has, like, eyeballs that are, like, it's literally just the eyeballs. It doesn't even have, like, a head. And they're just, like, talking to her, and they're like, oh, like, you played with us, now we're gonna play with you. That was, like, what I was talking about when there is some, like, kind of creepy stuff that's, takes place throughout this movie. That's definitely one of them. There's also, I think it's her, like, little brother. At one point, he sees, like, the Commando Elite and stuff, and the toys, like, end up jumping on him and, like, tackling him. And I was just like, imagine being, like, a little kid and just having these, like, toys, like, jumping on you and attacking you. Like, you'd be, like, traumatized for life. So, which is hilarious. And then, like, in the scene with Kirsten Dunst, her, like, boyfriend ends up coming in, and they end up, like, jumping all over him and, like, tying him up and stuff like that. And he ends up, like, escaping and running away. But just like that's what you kind of expect with, a movie like Small Soldiers. And I think it just, like, totally delivers on, the comedy. I think it is great. The action, just seeing these, like, toys come to life was just, just made this movie really fun. And honestly, I feel like we don't get a lot of these movies anymore, like we did in, like, the 90s. You had a lot of these, like, crazy different ideas, and it wasn't something that was completely original, like I said, Toy Story and stuff like that. But we just don't get many films where it's, like, these toys coming to life, and, they're trying to, like, go after these other toys and, like, also kill this, like, family. That just doesn't happen every day. So it was a film that, like I said, I remember seeing it in theaters, watched it a bunch when I was a kid, and, I still watch to this day. I just recently rewatched it for this review, and it still holds up for me. So overall, I would say I would give this film a 8 out of 10. Like I said, I had a lot of fun with it. If you guys haven't checked it out, I think it's one that, if you're a fan of, like, 90s films and stuff like that, and you're in for a little cheese, I think you'll really enjoy Small Soldiers. So let me know, if you guys have seen Small Soldiers. Let me know if it is, what your thoughts are on the film. And if you haven't seen it, if you check it out, come back here to the review and leave your thoughts down below in the comments, because I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say. But yeah, it was just a movie. I'm feeling really nostalgic lately. Last week I did, Are the Afraid of the Dark. This week we're talking about Small Soldiers. So we'll see what else I can come up with. But make sure, if you guys are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button and the bell button next to it, just so that way you guys do get notifications for all my new videos. It's definitely harder, being like a smaller YouTube channel. I don't always pop up there. So if you guys can subscribe, hit that bell, and also hit the thumbs up, it makes, my chances in the YouTube algorithm kind of go up. So I really appreciate it, and that way you guys can, see more of my videos. But as always, guys, make sure to do that, and always check back for more Pop Culture with Pat.